At 8:47 a.m., billionaire Clinton Valerius stood at a podium in front of 200 people, his $4,000 Brioni suit soaked in flop sweat, watching his entire empire collapse in real time. Not from a boardroom betrayal, not from a hostile takeover, but from a single email read aloud by a 22-year-old college student who had never owned a suit in her life. The woman standing beside him wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't a crisis manager. She was a night shift waitress from a broken diner in the Bronx, still wearing her sensible non-slip shoes beneath a borrowed blazer. Her name was Kara Morgan, and 72 hours earlier, she had spilled coffee on a dead man's letter. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how a $14 billion financial empire was saved by a woman who earned $11.50 an hour plus tips, we need to go back. Back to a diner, back to a box, back to a single sentence that changed everything. You're reading the words, but you're not reading the story. The clock on the wall of the Beacon Diner read 3:47 a.m. The O in Beacon had flickered and died 8 months ago, leaving the establishment perpetually known to its regulars as the Beacon Diner. It was a fitting name for a place that specialized in serving the city's night owls, the insomniacs, the broken, and the forgotten. Kara Morgan fell into at least 3 of those categories. She wiped down the same stretch of Formica countertop for the 14th time that shift, the sharp chemical smell of industrial disinfectant doing nothing to mask the permanent aroma of old grease and burnt coffee that had seeped into the walls decades ago. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with that specific frequency designed to make everyone look 10 years older and deeply unwell. Kara was 34 years old. Her dark skin, usually rich and warm, had taken on a grayish undertone from months of night shifts and fluorescent lighting. Her natural hair was pulled back into a practical puff, and her eyes, once bright with ambition, now carried the permanent weight of exhaustion. 3 years ago, Kara Morgan wasn't wiping counters. She was a senior forensic accountant at Deloitte, one of the Big Four, specializing in fraud detection and financial crime investigation. She was the one they called when a company's numbers didn't just look wrong, they smelled criminal. She had a gift, an almost supernatural ability to see the human story hidden behind spreadsheets, to trace the fingerprints of greed through layers of shell companies and offshore accounts. Her colleagues called her the Bloodhound. She could smell a lie in a balance sheet from 3 fiscal years away. Then life did what life does best. It reminded her that success was a privilege, not a permanent state. Her mother, Eleanor Morgan, a retired schoolteacher who had raised Kara alone while working 2 jobs, was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's at 61. The disease moved fast, faster than anyone expected. Within 18 months, the woman who had memorized every poem in the Harlem Renaissance couldn't remember her daughter's name. The insurance ran out. The good facilities, the ones that treated patients like people instead of problems, cost $12,000 a month. Kara's 6-figure salary, once a source of pride, became tissue paper against a wildfire of medical bills. She liquidated everything: her 401k, her savings, the small apartment in Brooklyn Heights that she'd spent 5 years paying off. And when the money ran out anyway, she had to find work that paid cash, tonight. Every night, while still being flexible enough to handle the 3 a.m. phone calls when her mother wandered out of bed, confused and terrified. The 80-hour weeks of forensic accounting didn't allow for that kind of flexibility, but the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner did. So Kara traded her power suits for polyester, her calculator for a coffee pot, and her corner office view of the Manhattan skyline for a view of the Bruckner Expressway. The woman who once testified before the SEC now memorized the difference between eggs over easy and eggs over medium. The tips were the only thing keeping her mother in Sunrise Gardens, a mid-tier memory care facility in Queens that at least had staff who remembered their patients' names. Kara had made her peace with it. Mostly. The bell over the diner's entrance jangled at 3:52 a.m., and Kara looked up from her 1,000th wipe of the counter. The man who walked in wasn't one of her regulars. He wasn't a cab driver. He wasn't a night shift nurse. He wasn't a drunk stumbling home from a bar. He was expensive, even disheveled, even at nearly 4 in the morning, even with his tie loosened and his hair uncombed, you could tell. His wool overcoat was Loro Piana, she guessed $6,000 minimum, thrown carelessly over a cashmere sweater. His watch, visible as he pushed through the door, was a Patek Philippe, the kind that cost more than most people's houses. But it was his face that made Kara pause mid-wipe. He looked haunted, not tired, not stressed. Haunted. His eyes, a striking blue-gray, were hollowed out, surrounded by dark circles that suggested not just one sleepless night, but many. His skin had the pallid, waxy quality of someone running on empty. He moved like a man carrying an invisible weight, each step deliberate and heavy. In his left hand, he clutched a small metal box. It was old, scratched, the kind of thing you'd find in an antique store. His fingers were wrapped around it so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He looked, Kara thought, like a man attending his own funeral. This was Clinton Valerius. But Kara didn't know that. She didn't follow the financial news anymore. The world of billion-dollar deals and corporate titans felt like a past life, a movie she'd watched once and mostly forgotten. To her, he was just table 7. Clinton collapsed into the booth by the window, the vinyl groaning beneath him. He set the metal box on the table with a careful, almost reverent motion, then stared at it like it might bite him. "Coffee," he said without looking up. His voice was hoarse, scraped raw. "Black, and keep it coming." "Coming right up," Kara said, her voice on autopilot. She returned with a heavy ceramic mug and the pot of the diner's notoriously terrible brew. As she poured, she caught a better look at the box. It was old, maybe 40 or 50 years, with a small keyhole on the front, the kind of lockbox people used to keep important documents in before everything went digital. "Anything to eat?" she asked. He shook his head, still not meeting her eyes. "Just coffee." Kara retreated behind the counter, but she couldn't stop watching him. Professional curiosity, she told herself, the same instinct that used to make her a great auditor. He wasn't reading anything. He wasn't doing anything. He was just staring at that box like it contained either salvation or damnation, and he couldn't decide which. At 4:15 a.m., the diner's other waitress, Flo, a heavy-set woman in her 60s who'd been working the Beacon since the Reagan administration, waddled over to Kara. "Table 3 wants to switch to the booth," Flo muttered. "Said the draft's bothering her arthritis." Kara sighed. Table 3 was Mrs. Patterson, a regular who came in 3 nights a week to complain about everything from the coffee temperature to the alignment of her silverware. But she also tipped in cash and never asked questions when Kara needed to leave early for a call from Sunrise Gardens. "I'll handle it," Kara said. The shuffle was routine. Mrs. Patterson moved to the booth. Her half-eaten toast and untouched eggs went with her. Kara grabbed the plate from what was now the empty table, turned, and headed toward what she thought was still Mrs. Patterson's original location. It wasn't. In the shuffle, Kara had gotten turned around. She was heading toward table 7, toward the haunted man with the metal box. She realized her mistake a half-second too late. Her foot caught on the edge of a floor mat that had bunched up during the booth migration. She stumbled, lurched forward, and the plate in her hand, still holding Mrs. Patterson's cold eggs and triangle of wheat toast, swung wildly. It didn't hit Clinton. It hit the box. The metal container flew off the table, hit the floor with a sharp clang, and the old, corroded latch gave way on impact. The lid popped open. Papers scattered across the grimy linoleum like fallen leaves. "No, no, no, no!" Clinton was on his feet instantly, his face draining of what little color remained. "I'm so sorry," Kara gasped, already on her knees, reaching for the scattered documents. "I'm so sorry I wasn't looking, "Don't touch them!" Clinton's voice cracked like a whip, but it was too late. Kara's hand had already closed around a yellowed envelope. old paper, the kind that crinkled with age. The envelope was open, and as she lifted it, a single sheet of paper slid partially out. The handwriting on it was elegant, old-fashioned, clearly written with a fountain pen. Kara's eyes, trained by years of scanning documents for a single anomalous word, caught a fragment of text before Clinton snatched it from her hand. Not everyone is a traitor. Find someone who knows how to look behind the numbers. Time seemed to freeze. Clinton stood over her, his breathing ragged, the letter clutched to his chest like a wounded animal. His eyes, those hollow, haunted eyes, were suddenly blazing with something between fury and terror. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. Kara rose slowly, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I didn't mean to. It was an accident. I'll pay for any damage. That letter," Clinton cut her off, his voice barely above a whisper, "hasn't been seen by anyone. Ever. My father wrote it before he died, 14 years ago. I only just found it last week, hidden in his old study. And you, a waitress in a diner at 4 a.m., you just—" He trailed off, sinking back into the booth like his strings had been cut. Kara should have walked away. Should have apologized again, offered him free coffee for life, and returned to the safety of her counter. That's what a smart person would do. That's what a person who wanted to keep her job would do. But Kara Morgan had never been good at walking away from puzzles. She looked at Clinton Valerius, at the letter pressed against his chest, at the hollow desperation in his eyes, and she said the words that would change both their lives forever. "You're reading the words, but you're not reading the story." Clinton's head snapped up. "What?" Kara pointed at the letter. That line. "Find someone who knows how to look behind the numbers. Your father didn't write that for you to understand the words. He wrote it because he knew something. Something hidden. Something in the numbers themselves. How would you know what my father meant?" "I don't," Kara admitted. "But I spent 10 years looking behind numbers for a living, and I know what it looks like when someone's trying to leave a trail. That letter isn't a goodbye. It's a map." Clinton stared at her for a long, loaded moment. Then, slowly, he unfolded the letter and read it again, this time with different eyes. "Who are you?" he asked. "Kara Morgan," she said. "I'm your waitress, but I used to be something else." The next 4 hours changed everything. It started slowly. Clinton, against every instinct screaming at him to trust no one, began to talk. Maybe it was the hour. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was something in Kara's steady, unflinching gaze that reminded him of a woman he'd once trusted completely, his mother, before cancer took her when he was 12. His father, Harrison Valerius, had built Valerius Holdings from nothing. A first-generation immigrant from Greece, Harrison had arrived in New York in 1962 with $40 in his pocket and a mind that could see patterns in chaos. He'd started with a single laundromat in Queens. By the time he died in 2011, he controlled a $14 billion empire spanning real estate, technology, and private equity. Clinton had inherited everything: the money, the power, the legacy, and it seemed the enemies. "For the past 18 months, Clinton said, his coffee growing cold, everything has been falling apart. Projects that should succeed are failing. Investments that should be safe are hemorrhaging money. It's not just bad luck. It's targeted, surgical, like someone knows exactly where to cut." "And you think it's internal," Kara said. Clinton nodded. "It has to be. The only people who know enough to do this kind of damage are the ones with access. My executive team, my board, my CFO. "Bennett Reed," Kara said. Clinton's eyes widened. "How do you know that name?" "You said it on the phone earlier. When you thought I wasn't listening?" He almost smiled. Almost. "You're observant. It's a habit." Clinton pulled out a tablet from his coat, a slim, cutting-edge device that probably cost more than Kara's monthly rent. He swiped through a series of financial documents, internal reports marked confidential in aggressive red letters. "This is everything," he said. "Every failed project, every unexplained loss, every account that's bled money. I've had 3 different forensic teams look at this. Deloitte, KPMG, PwC. None of them found anything actionable." Kara leaned forward, her eyes scanning the documents with the focus of a hawk spotting prey. "May I?" Clinton handed her the tablet. For the next 30 minutes, Kara was gone. Not physically, her body remained in the booth at table 7, but her mind traveled backward in time, back to the corner office at Deloitte, back to late nights surrounded by spreadsheets and coffee cups, back to the version of herself that could smell fraud like a sommelier smelling a corked wine. She scrolled. She calculated. She cross-referenced. She muttered numbers under her breath, a habit that had driven her former colleagues insane. At 5:23 a.m., she stopped. "March 14th, she said. Clinton frowned. "What about it? March 14th, 2012, March 14th, 2013, March 14th, 2014, all the way through to this year." She turned the tablet to face him, pointing at a column of dates. Every single anomalous transaction, every unexplained transfer, every project that mysteriously lost funding, they all happen on or around March 14th. Clinton's face went pale. That's the anniversary of my father's death." "I know," Kara said softly. "It's in his obituary. I looked it up while you were getting refills." "But that doesn't make sense. Why would someone time their theft to—" He stopped. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "The scholarship fund," he whispered. Kara waited. "My father," Clinton said, his voice shaking now, "he had a private foundation, completely separate from the company. He used it to fund scholarships for underprivileged students, specifically minority women pursuing careers in finance and accounting. He never publicized it, never took credit, he just did it. Every year, on the anniversary of his arrival in America. March 14th. March 14th. Kara felt something click into place. Where did the funding come from? A dedicated trust, set up decades ago. It was supposed to be untouchable, self-sustaining. My father designed it himself. And who administered it after he died? Clinton closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. Bennett Reed. He was my father's protege, his right hand. My father trusted him completely. He left Bennett in charge of everything, including the scholarship fund. The sun was rising now, pale light filtering through the diner's grease-streaked windows. The breakfast crowd would arrive soon, but Kara and Clinton might as well have been on a different planet. "I need you to understand something," Kara said carefully. "If I'm right, if this pattern means what I think it means, someone has been using your father's legacy to steal from you. Not just money. They've been stealing the one thing your father cared about most, his gift to the next generation." Clinton's hands curled into fists. "Bennett. Maybe, probably, but we need proof, and we need to be smart about how we get it. I'll confront him. You'll do nothing." Kara cut him off. "Listen to me. Right now, you're a grieving son who's been under tremendous stress. That's the narrative. If you go in guns blazing, accusing your CFO of fraud without ironclad evidence, you know what happens?" Clinton didn't answer. "The board removes you," Kara continued. "They'll say you've had a breakdown. Bennett becomes the hero who saved the company from its unstable CEO. You lose everything and he wins." "Then what do I do?" Kara thought for a long moment. Then she smiled, a small, dangerous smile that Clinton would come to recognize as her hunting face. "We let him think he's already won." The next 48 hours were a masterclass in misdirection. Clinton, following Kara's carefully orchestrated instructions, did exactly what Bennett expected him to do. He spiraled, publicly, spectacularly. He missed a board meeting. He gave a rambling, emotional interview to the Wall Street Journal where he spoke about the tremendous pressure of living up to his father's legacy. He was photographed looking disheveled outside a bar at 2 a.m., though in reality he'd been meeting with Kara to review financial records in a back booth at a different diner in Jersey City. The narrative wrote itself. Clinton Valerius is cracking under the weight of the Valerius empire. The poor man needs help. Bennett Reed, ever the loyal soldier, stepped into the spotlight. He gave interviews assuring investors that the company was stable, that the transition of leadership was proceeding smoothly, that he personally would ensure the Valerius legacy remained intact. "He's so confident," Clinton said bitterly, watching a clip of Bennett on CNBC. "He actually believes he's untouchable." "Good," Kara said. "Confident men make mistakes. Arrogant men make bigger ones." They were in Kara's apartment now, a cramped studio in the Bronx that smelled faintly of the lavender air freshener she used to mask the mildew. The walls were bare except for a single photograph of Kara and her mother, taken years ago when Eleanor still remembered who she was. Clinton had offered to move their operation to a luxury hotel, a penthouse, anywhere that didn't require him to duck under a low door frame. Kara had refused. "This is where I work best," she'd said. "Distractions are for people who can afford them." Now, surrounded by stacks of financial records that Clinton had smuggled out of Valerius Holdings, Kara was in her element. She'd covered one wall with a timeline, sticky notes and printouts connected by strings of red yarn like something out of a detective movie. "Here's what I know," she said, pointing to the wall. "Every year since your father died, approximately $2.3 million has been diverted from the scholarship trust. The transactions are disguised as legitimate disbursements, administrative fees, operational costs, consulting payments, but none of that money ever reaches students." "Where does it go?" "Shell companies, at least 4 of them, all registered in Delaware, which means minimal disclosure requirements. From there, the trail gets murky, but I'd bet my last tip that it eventually circles back to Bennett." "That's $30 million, Clinton said, doing the math. "Over 13 years. It's not about the money," Kara interrupted. "Not for Bennett. The Valerius fortune is worth billions. $30 million is a rounding error. Then what's the point?" Kara turned to face him, her dark eyes intense. "Control. Think about it. Every year, on the anniversary of your father's death, Bennett gets to make a choice. He gets to decide that those scholarships don't matter, that your father's wishes don't matter, that the students who would have been helped, the future accountants, the future auditors, the future women who might have changed the world, they don't matter. He's not just stealing money, he's erasing my father's legacy. Piece by piece, year by year. And the cruelest part?" Kara's voice dropped. "He's using your father's own generosity as the weapon. The same trust designed to help people is now the vehicle for their betrayal." Clinton was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "My father used to say that the measure of a man wasn't what he built for himself. It was what he built for others." Bennett heard that speech 100 times. He stood next to my father at charity galas and foundation events. He smiled for the cameras. He gave toasts about legacy and responsibility. And all the while, he was counting the money he'd take. "How do we stop him?" Kara walked to the window, looking out at the pre-dawn darkness of the Bronx. Somewhere out there, her mother was sleeping in a facility paid for by tips and desperation. Somewhere out there, students who should have been helped by the Valerius scholarship were working night shifts and taking out loans they'd never repay. "We don't fight him with numbers," she said finally. "Every forensic team you've hired has tried that. They've looked for discrepancies in spreadsheets and anomalies in ledgers. That's Bennett's territory. He's covered his tracks too well." "Then how?" Kara turned back to face him. "We fight him with stories, with people, with the one thing he can't control or manipulate. The truth, told by the people who lived it." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Clinton would announce a memorial event for his father, a celebration of Harrison Valerius's legacy to be held at the company's headquarters on the 14th anniversary of his death. The centerpiece would be the scholarship fund, finally receiving the public recognition it deserved. "We invite everyone," Kara explained. "The media, the board, the investors, and most importantly, we invite the scholarship recipients. Every student who ever received funding from the Harrison Valerius Foundation." "But the scholarships stopped," Clinton said. "Bennett shut them down." "No. He told you they continued. He showed you reports every year with names and disbursement amounts. But those reports were fabricated. The students were never funded. The money was redirected. So we find the real students, the ones who should have received scholarships." "Exactly. And we find the ones from the early years, the ones who actually were funded before Bennett took over. We let them tell their stories. We let them talk about what the scholarship meant to them. And then we ask the simple question, where did all the other students go?" Bennett would be standing right there when the discrepancy became undeniable. Not in a boardroom where he could spin and deflect. In front of cameras, in front of the people he'd robbed, in front of the world. "It's not enough to prove he's guilty," Kara said. "We need everyone to see it, at the same time, with no chance for damage control." Finding the scholarship recipients took 2 days of intense work. Kara reached out to her former contacts at Deloitte, calling in favors she'd been saving for a rainy day. She tracked down university financial aid offices, cross-referencing names from the early years of the scholarship with current addresses and phone numbers. The early recipients, the ones from before Bennett took control, were easy to find. They were successful now, accountants and analysts and financial controllers scattered across the country. They remembered Harrison Valerius with genuine fondness. Several of them cried when Kara called. "That scholarship changed my life," one woman said. Her name was Denise Washington, now a VP of Finance at a Fortune 500 company. "Without it, I never would have finished my degree. Mr. Valerius, he wrote me a personal letter. Said he believed in me. I still have it." The later years were a different story. Kara found the names that appeared in Bennett's fabricated reports. She tracked them down, and one by one she confirmed what she already knew. None of them had ever received a scholarship. Most of them had never heard of the Harrison Valerius Foundation. One name hit particularly hard, Marcus Freeman. The reports showed him receiving a $40,000 scholarship in 2018. According to Bennett's records, Marcus had used the money to complete his accounting degree at Howard University. In reality, Marcus Freeman had dropped out of Howard in 2019, crushed by student debt he couldn't manage. He'd applied for the Valerius scholarship twice. Both times he'd been told the fund was fully allocated. Kara found him working as a delivery driver in Baltimore. "I remember that foundation," Marcus said when Kara called. His voice was flat, tired. "I thought I had a real shot, you know. My grades were good. My essays were good. But they kept saying there was no money. And I kept thinking, how is there no money? This dude was a billionaire." "Would you be willing to tell that story?" Kara asked. "In front of cameras?" There was a long pause. "You're saying someone stole my scholarship?" "I'm saying someone stole a lot of people's scholarships, and I'm trying to make it right." Another pause. Then, when and where? The morning of the memorial event, Kara stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her cramped apartment and tried to recognize herself. Clinton had sent a car, not just any car, a Mercedes Maybach with a driver in a crisp uniform. Inside, waiting for her, was a garment bag containing a suit. A real suit, the kind she used to wear in her old life before everything fell apart. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. Clinton had somehow gotten her measurements without her noticing. But Kara didn't feel like herself in the suit. She felt like an imposter, a waitress playing dress-up. Her phone buzzed, a text from the care facility. "Your mother had a good night. She asked about you." Kara closed her eyes, drew a breath. Then she picked up the one item she'd refused to leave behind. Her Beacon Diner apron, stained and faded, folded small enough to fit in her jacket pocket. A reminder of who she really was. and why this mattered. The memorial was held in the grand atrium of Valerius Tower, a soaring space of glass and marble that Harrison Valerius had designed himself. Sunlight streamed through the three-story windows, illuminating a portrait of Harrison that hung behind the podium. The room was packed, board members in expensive suits, investors checking their phones, journalists with cameras and notepads, and scattered throughout, standing out like beacons of color in a sea of corporate gray, the scholarship recipients. There were 23 of them: Denise Washington from the early years, Marcus Freeman from Baltimore, and 21 others, a mixture of those who had been helped and those who had been denied, united by a single thread. Their lives had been touched, for better or worse, by the Harrison Valerius Foundation. Bennett Reed stood near the front, resplendent in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He was chatting amiably with a board member, his smile easy, his body language relaxed. He had no idea what was coming. Clinton took the podium first. He looked different than he had in the diner 3 days ago. Still tired, still carrying weight, but something had shifted behind his eyes. Purpose. Clarity. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his voice carrying through the atrium. 14 years ago, I lost my father. Harrison Valerius was many things: a businessman, an innovator, a dreamer. But to me, he was simply Dad. And the thing he cared about most, even more than this company, was making sure the next generation had opportunities he never did. He paused, glancing at Kara, who stood near the back of the room. My father created a scholarship fund for young people pursuing careers in finance, specifically for minority women, because he believed correctly that our industry was far too white and far too male. He wanted to change that, not with speeches or press releases, with money, with action. A ripple of approving murmurs went through the crowd. Today, I want to celebrate that legacy, and I want you to hear from the people it touched. Denise Washington went first. She spoke for 3 minutes about growing up poor in Cleveland, about the rejection letters from financial aid offices, about the day she received a letter from the Harrison Valerius Foundation telling her she'd been selected. "I still have that letter," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "Mr. Valerius wrote it himself. He said, 'Your potential is not determined by your circumstances. It's determined by your character.' That scholarship didn't just pay for my education. It told me I was worth investing in." Applause. Genuine, heartfelt applause. 3 more recipients spoke, similar stories, similar gratitude. Then Marcus Freeman took the stage. He was wearing a borrowed suit that didn't quite fit. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "My name is Marcus Freeman," he said. "According to your company's records, I received a $40,000 scholarship from the Harrison Valerius Foundation in 2018. He paused. "I didn't." The room went quiet. "I applied for that scholarship twice. Both times I was told the fund was fully allocated. I had to take out loans to finish my degree. When those loans became too much, I dropped out. I now work as a delivery driver." Marcus looked directly at Bennett Reed. "Someone used my name to fake a scholarship. Someone told this company they were helping people like me while they were actually taking everything for themselves." Bennett's smile faltered. "And I want to know," Marcus continued, his voice rising, "where my money went." The atrium erupted. Journalists surged forward. Board members turned to stare at Bennett. Clinton remained at the podium, his face carefully neutral. "This is outrageous," Bennett sputtered, stepping forward. "This is clearly a misunderstanding. The scholarship fund has been audited regularly. Every disbursement is documented." "Then explain this," Clinton said. He clicked a button on the podium, and the massive screen behind him flickered to life. On it appeared 2 documents side by side. On the left, an official disbursement record showing a $40,000 payment to Marcus Freeman, Howard University, 2018. On the right, An email from the Harrison Valerius Foundation to Marcus Freeman, dated 3 weeks after the supposed payment, rejecting his application due to funding constraints. "These records can't both be true," Clinton said. "Either Marcus received the money or he didn't. The foundation told him he was rejected. Your records say he was approved. Someone is lying, Bennett." You're twisting things. The records were maintained by multiple departments. Mistakes happen. For 13 years, every March 14th, to the tune of $30 million? Bennett's face went white. "We've traced the money," Clinton continued. "Every fake disbursement, every shell company, every account in Delaware and Cyprus and the Caymans. The trail leads to one place, Bennett. It leads to you. You can't prove that." "Actually," a new voice said, "I can." Kara stepped forward. She was still in the back of the room, but every eye turned to her. "My name is Kara Morgan," she said. "I spent 10 years as a forensic accountant specializing in fraud detection, and 3 days ago, I found something your auditors missed." She walked toward the front of the room, pulling out her phone. "You were careful, Mr. Reed. Shell companies, layered transactions, fabricated records, but you made one mistake. You couldn't resist a pattern." She reached the podium and held up her phone, displaying a simple spreadsheet. Every fraudulent transaction occurred on March 14th, the anniversary of Harrison Valerius's death. You weren't just stealing money, you were sending a message. Every year, on the day that mattered most, you reminded yourself that you had won, that you had beaten him. "This is insane!" Bennett hissed. "Who is this woman? She's nobody. She's a waitress, for God's sake." "I am," Kara agreed. "I'm a waitress at a diner in the Bronx. I work the night shift. I earn $11.50 an hour plus tips, and I'm the one who caught you." She turned to the room. "I found 127 fake scholarship recipients. I traced $31.7 million in diverted funds. I have emails, I have wire transfers, I have bank statements. Everything Mr. Reed thought he'd hidden, I found." "You can't trust her," Bennett shouted. She's working with Clinton. This is a setup. He's trying to push me out so he can..." "So I can what, Bennett?" Clinton's voice was ice. "So I can discover that you've been stealing from my father's legacy for 13 years? So I can learn that the man my father trusted most has been systematically destroying everything he built?" The room was silent. "I have one more thing," Kara said quietly. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. The letter. The one from the metal box. "This is a letter Harrison Valerius wrote before he died. His son found it last week." She unfolded it and read, "My son, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But my dreams are not. Not everyone around you is a traitor, but someone is. Someone who smiles at charity galas and speaks of legacy while counting stolen coins. Find someone who knows how to look behind the numbers. They will show you the truth, and when you find it, remember, the measure of a man is not what he builds for himself, it's what he builds for others." She looked at Bennett. Harrison knew. Maybe not who, but he knew something was wrong. He tried to warn his son. And 13 years later, the truth finally came out. Not because of expensive auditors or forensic algorithms, because of a woman who spilled coffee on a letter in a diner at 4 a.m. Bennett lunged. It happened so fast that no one had time to react. He shoved past a board member, his face twisted with rage, and grabbed for Kara's throat. Security was on him in seconds. 2 guards pulled him back, his arms pinned behind him. He was screaming now, all pretense of composure gone. "You think you've won? You think this changes anything? I built this company. I kept it running while that idiot..." He jerked his head at Clinton. "Played Billionaire. Harrison Valerius was a fool. A bleeding heart fool who wanted to give his fortune away to people who didn't deserve it. I saved this company from him." "You stole from children," Kara said quietly. "You took scholarships from students who needed them. You erased futures. They would have wasted it anyway. You think some girl from the projects is going to change the world because she got a free ride to college? Please. I invested that money properly. I made it work. You made it work for yourself. Bennett laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Of course I did. That's what smart people do. That's what winners do. Your father was a loser, Clinton. A soft, sentimental loser who thought kindness was a business strategy. I'm the one who made Valerius Holdings what it is. Me! The room was silent. Then Marcus Freeman spoke. I would have made it, he said quietly. If someone had believed in me the way Mr. Valerius believed in those early recipients, I would have made it. I know I would have. Bennett sneered. You're a delivery driver. You prove my point. I'm a delivery driver, Marcus agreed. But I'm also a human being. Something you seem to have forgotten. The FBI arrived at 9:47 a.m. Bennett Reed was escorted from the building in handcuffs, his face a mask of cold fury. The cameras captured every moment. By noon, the story was everywhere. Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNN. The narrative was irresistible. A billionaire's betrayal, a waitress's redemption, and a dead man's letter that exposed the truth. Kara watched it all from a quiet corner of the atrium, her borrowed suit feeling more and more foreign with each passing minute. Clinton found her there. You should be giving interviews, he said. Every network wants to talk to you. I'm not really an interview person. You're a hero. I'm a waitress who got lucky. Clinton sat down beside her. For a moment they were quiet, watching the chaos unfold. My father would have liked you, he said finally. I would have liked him. He believed in people, you know, genuinely, not as a PR strategy or a tax write-off. He actually believed that if you gave people a chance, most of them would rise to it. Kara thought of her mother, of the choices she'd made, of the life she'd set aside. Most people will, she said, if someone believes in them first. 6 months later, the 40th floor of Valerius Tower had been transformed. Gone were the heavy mahogany tables and the oppressive portraits of corporate titans. In their place were open workspaces, bright colors, and a wall covered with photographs of smiling students holding acceptance letters. This was the new home of the Morgan Valerius Foundation. Kara Morgan stood at the window, looking out at Central Park. She was wearing a suit again, but this one felt different. This one felt like hers. Behind her, a team of 6 was processing scholarship applications. Real applications. From real students. Over 3,000 had applied in the first month alone. Clinton had offered her the CFO position. Twice. She'd refused. Twice. I don't want to stand behind big numbers, she'd told him. I want to stand behind small people. So he'd given her the foundation instead. Full authority. Unlimited budget. A mandate to do what his father had always dreamed of. Change lives, one scholarship at a time. The door opened. Clinton walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Terrible coffee, he said, handing her one. Just like you like it. Kara smiled. You remembered. Hard to forget. That diner coffee was the worst thing I've ever tasted, and also the most important. They stood together at the window, watching the city below. Bennett's trial starts next week, Clinton said. Prosecutors are asking for 15 years, wire fraud, securities fraud, theft. He's not getting out of this. Good. And the scholarship fund has already disbursed more money in 6 months than Bennett claimed to disburse in 13 years. Better. Marcus Freeman is enrolled at Howard again. Full scholarship. He starts in January. Kara closed her eyes. That's the best news I've heard all day. Clinton was quiet for a moment. Then, my father was right, you know. He said to find someone who could look behind the numbers. He said they would show me the truth. I just saw what was there. No. Clinton shook his head. You saw what everyone else missed, the pattern, the dates, the human story hidden inside the spreadsheets. My father spent millions on forensic auditors. They found nothing. You found everything. because you understood something they didn't. What's that? That numbers aren't just numbers. They're people. They're choices. They're the measure of who we are and what we value. He paused. My father always said the measure of a man is what he builds for others. You took that idea and made it real. Kara looked at the wall of photographs. Students from all over the country. Different backgrounds, different stories, same opportunity. The opportunity she'd almost never had. The opportunity Bennett had stolen from so many. Your father didn't build an empire of money, she said quietly. He built an empire of kindness. Bennett tried to tear it down, but kindness is harder to destroy than people think. Clinton raised his coffee cup. To kindness, then. To kindness. They drank. On the wall behind them, next to the photographs of scholarship recipients, hung a simple frame. Inside was a stained polyester apron, faded and worn, with Beacon Diner stitched on the front. A reminder that the most important details are often hidden in plain sight. A reminder that anyone can change the world, even a night shift waitress with nothing to lose. And a reminder that sometimes the person everyone ignores is the person who sees everything. And just like that, an empire was saved. Not by expensive consultants or high-powered lawyers, not by algorithms or artificial intelligence, by a woman who spilled coffee on a letter, by a billionaire who finally listened, and by a dead man who knew that the truth would find a way. Kara Morgan proved what her mother had always told her. Your circumstances don't define you. Your character does. And the person serving your coffee might just be the smartest person in the room. The Beacon Diner still serves coffee at 4 a.m. The regulars still complain about the toast. And somewhere in the Bronx, there's a delivery driver who just got his second chance. What do you think of Bennett's arrogance? Were you cheering when Kara walked into that boardroom? This story reminds us that kindness is not weakness. It's the foundation of every legacy worth building. If you loved this story of hidden brilliance and quiet heroism, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Share this with someone who needs to remember that the underdog can and does win. And tell me in the comments, have you ever met someone like Kara? A person everyone underestimated who turned out to be exactly who the world needed? We'll see you in the next one. Next.